G'day guys and gal. Magnus falling to chaos was definitely the biggest kick to the balls that the Big E copped during the Horus Heresy. Not only did Magnus accidentally ruin the Webway project, mankind's only hope to beat chaos, due to trusting a demon god, but then Magnus was saved and converted to evil by the very same demon god when the Emperor tried to bring Magnus back to Terra. The reason why that second part sucks as well is because the Emperor could have used Magnus as a big old red battery for the Golden Throne, whilst the Big E could have gone off and slapped Horus around years before he even got close to the solar system. Maybe by using Majorkill and Magnus, the Emperor could have saved the Webway project as well. All in all, a massive L. But not all of Magnus was lost to Titsnitch's tricks. A shard of Magnus, his noble shard, escaped and continued its quest to defend the Imperium. Today we'll go over what the Noble Shard of Magnus is and where it currently is. We'll also discuss who could possibly hold it and how it might be used one day to save Magnus's soul and turn him back into a loyalist. Let's get into it. Magnus didn't want to be a big balls demon bitch of Titsnitch. Out of all the traitor Primarchs, he took the most effort to bring down. He knew what Chaos was trying to do to him, and he put in a serious shift to try stop the Horus Heresy. If only he hadn't done it in such a retarded way, then everything wouldn't be such a mess. For those that don't know and need to catch up, Magnus was the wizard Primarch and had a lot of mastery of the warp, because pretty much only him and the Big E were super psychers, they formed a special bond. Unfortunately, Magnus's power turned him into a cocky dickhead who thought he was untouchable, hence allowing the Chaos Gods, most notably Titsnitch, to slowly feed his ego. They did this by allowing him to think he could overpower the warp and save his sons from turning into Chaos Spawns, as well as not punishing him as much as they usually would for his reckless exploration of the Immaterium. This all came to a head when Magnus was banned from using his warp powers because he was getting a little bit too into the voodoo side of things. Magnus tried to obey this ban, but telling Magnus not to do voodoo is like telling the Australian Nationals Party to stop killing koalas. They're just too addicted to stop. Magnus would use this forbidden power to discover Horus was about to turn to chaos, and he tried to, but couldn't stop him. He then used the power to try warn the Emperor that Horus had fallen. The issue was that in order to quickly contact Daddy, Magnus had to astral project using forbidden warp powers. As he was so cocky, he also disregarded the Emperor's huge psychic wall that was keeping humanity's only hope safe and decided to bust through the wall to warn Dad. Now, you've got your red nerdy son who is already in the naughty corner for using magic, with said magic dooming humanity. Are you going to listen to him when he tells you that his favourite son Horus is super evil now? No, and neither did the Emperor, who then sent Leman Russ and his Space Wolves to go bring back Magnus for a good old fashioned spanking. Maybe the Emperor should have really highlighted that he wanted Magnus alive though, because Leman, after some convincing from the now evil Horus, decided to attack Magnus instead. To be fair, Magnus was being a little bitch and not responding to Leman's messages, but it was still a bit of a shit thing of Leman to do. To his credit, Magnus realised that he had fucked up badly and was more than happy to allow Leman to kill him and his sons, so that Titsnitch could never claim them. This didn't last long though, as Magnus changed his mind mid-battle and fought Leman. The two brothers fought, and despite Magnus putting up a good fight, hectic space Vikings are cooler than wannabe Egyptian nerds, hence Leman snapped Magnus' spine over his knee, Bane style. Before Leman could do anything else, Magnus was like, "Titsnitch, I still don't like you, but I'm too much of a bitch to face death, so please save me." Hence Magnus and his remaining sons were teleported to the Eye of Terror. Losing his spine combined with getting crudely teleported to hell resulted in Magnus' soul getting shattered into multiple pieces, each one containing a different part of his personality as well as his powers. We all caught up? Good, let's continue. His power shard became the new dominant form of Magnus, makes sense, but that shard still felt like dog shit, as imagine being a fragment of yourself with a broken back. His sons gathered enough shards together in order to stabilize the power shard, now called the Crimson King. The Crimson King realized that in order to become Magnus again, he needed to absorb his second most powerful shard, his Noble Shard, basically the best part of Magnus. This shard had ended up on Terra under the care of Malkador, who hatched a plan to create Magnus the Human Battery 2.0. The Khan brought a loyalist thousand son to Terra, who was suffering from the flesh change. Malkador began to merge that loyalist with the Noble Shard of Magnus, which would then have more or less killed the loyalist, but allowed the shard to be really powerful. But the Khan was like, "Ugh, give my boy a chance," and he fucked with the ritual. The result was the creation of an extremely powerful noble warrior called Janus, who was also apparently a Canadian, as the first thing he did when he was spawned was apologise that he wasn't a good enough battery for Malcador to use. Malcador was like, fuck it, I can work with this. Janus was like a demi-Primarch. He contained a huge level of power within the Noble Shard and was super loyal. He was appointed as the Supreme Grandmaster of the Grey Knights and was tasked with building the Order in secret. After that, he just kind of falls off the pages. He briefly appears during the War of the Beast and has been mentioned to have torn Chaos a mighty new asshole, but I feel like GW really missed out on a great opportunity here to give this man his own novel. There are barely any books that go into detail about the millennium following the Horus Heresy, and there are even less that really flesh out the Grey Knights. GW, if you're watching this, give us a Janus novel, and I won't commission Matt Ward hentai. Because of the lack of the Janus mentions, I can't say with 100% certainty what happened to him, other than he's dead. However, I have a pretty bloody good theory what actually ended up happening to him in the Noble Shard, and I reckon it's pretty on the money. Everyone knows about Kaldor Drago, the current Supreme Grandmaster of the Grey Knights, who is retardedly overpowered for no apparent reason. Except, maybe there is a reason. Here is my tinfoil hat conspiracy. Upon Janus's currently unknown death, the Noble Shard of Magnus within him survived and passed on to the next Supreme Grandmaster. This happened an unknown amount of times until Drago's Supreme Grandmaster was killed by Mortarion. I believe that shard then entered Drago, which gave him the power up and knowledge he needed to banish Morty back to Nurgle's smelly fiesta. Does that make sense? This is why Drago's so overpowered. He's a demi-Primarch. I don't really see any other explanation for it, and it would actually help Matt Ward look a little bit less retarded. Whilst numerous shards of Magnus have been destroyed permanently, some of them even killing themselves to avoid joining Chaos, it seems like a massive waste for this noble one to die alongside with them. Magnus in the current setting isn't a very good character. He's a grumpy, unlikable asshole with no redeeming qualities beyond his model being cool. He still has a raging hate bone against the Space Wolves for something that happened 10,000 years ago, due to Horus and Titsnitch fucking with him. He knows it wasn't really the Wolves' fault, and that Chaos was the true mastermind behind the fall of Prospero, but he chooses to bury his head in the sand and waste all the Thousand Sons' resources on suicidal attacks against Fenris and the Space Wolves. Magnus was supposed to be one of the strongest Primarchs by far, and one of the most interesting due to his inner conflict against his own nature, but instead we're left with a whiny bitch who keeps getting clapped by dreadnoughts and just normal Astartes. Hell, even Gilliman, arguably one of the worst fighters of all the Primarchs, was able to put up a hell of a fight and even emerge victorious over Magnus with a bit of help. Titsnitch has a claim over the Crimson King, but he doesn't have a claim over the Noble Shard of Magnus, hence it could create an incredibly interesting plotline for Magnus if he was able to merge the two shards. That, and it would allow GW to finally kill off Kaldor Drago in an impactful way which actually progresses the plot. It's a win-win. It could create another situation like the perfect loyalist clone of Fulgrim. Imagine we end up with a renegade Magnus whose soul is still tied to Chaos but is noble enough to see how evil Chaos is. Hence he fights against his own nature and tries to help the Imperium by manipulating events behind the scenes. There is a lot of possibility here, and I know Thousand Sons aren't satisfied with how Magnus was done. Magnus was done real fucking dirty. Dude just wanted to do the right thing but got screwed over and forced to be a part of Chaos unwillingly. Interestingly enough, the main reason why Magnus joined Horus for the Siege of Terra was so that he could reclaim his Noble Shard. I believe his motive was to gain the power of that shard, and he didn't really think about the implications of how it would affect his personality and loyalties. Or maybe I'm full of shit and the Noble Shard of Magnus is gone, or maybe if it does merge with Magnus, does fuck all other than giving that big old red tryhard a power boost. It's no secret I reckon the Traitor Primarchs and Chaos as a whole are very poorly written and conceived, with every single Traitor Primarch becoming less likeable, dynamic, and interesting the further they fall to Chaos. Stuff like a loyalist shard of Magnus, a potentially loyalist Amigon, and a loyalist clone of Fulgrim is super interesting to me. I love anti-heroes and characters that toe the line between good and evil, so I'm hoping we get to see some of that here with Magnus. And that does us for today, guys. What do we know about the loyalist shard of Magnus and where it could be? If you enjoyed the video and want to support the channel, then Patreon is the place to be, where only $1 per month give you access to a boatload of Warhammer hentai. Hit the subscribe button, then hit the real subscribe button for more big old red content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.